Hello, everybody. This is Empty Turtle. We're here with Dr. David Jubb, and this is JUBBTALK. Say hello, Dr. Jubb.
Hi, everybody. We've got a great show today. What is it we talk about, mate? Yeah.
We are doing ancient civilizations.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? A lot of things are going on a more perhaps a mindset sort of looking at things.
More and more discoveries. LIDAR is really opening things up. There was an ancient city discovered not too long ago in I think it was somewhere in Mexico or somewhere in the Amazon that they found a huge city that's just been covered up through from the jungle. Taking over it.
Technology like LIDAR is just for the listeners, sort of side scanning and causing us to be able to see compacted Earth and differences. Sort of, you could see trails. You could see where Earth is in different shapes and stuff. Sort of, you can see where buildings were in the past and this sort of a thing. But you can see which they've discovered a whole range of things. We're sort of looking for water and things under the Earth and found strange anomalies. Where compasses, for instance, want to point away from the site, sort of thing in this, like megalithic sites that were buried, and this sort of thing. Interesting though, because like when the Earth was at a different equator, you've got rocks turned up and all sorts of things, and magnetic alignment showing that the Earth, at some point was east, was west, was north, and this sort of thing. So we've had a past which really is being turned around and turned over a bit. But the biggest thing really is the idea of fusion, which always has existed. We run up against something which was put together by the Great Council more just to be able to conquest, and it's an asymmetric war tactic that ideas can got put, but a lot of ethnocentricity is being washed away a bit, because you could see like where people could be just from an area, they kind of, or their mentality or their worldview has caused them to interpret the world around them in a set way. Yeah.
Dr. Jubb, you mentioned the Great Council. Let me ask you, how old is the Great Council?
Well, that's very old, because the buildings and things and stuff and the workings of this goes back 2,000 years more. A people relative have had to defend themselves, but they were, broke away from a republic that used to be. There was 176 nations in that, and the people who had boats had connected all the ports around the world in the hinterland, and their mitochondrial DNA and these sorts of things, the Y and the X chromosome have sort of been looked at, and you can see how these people who had boats took their genes and put them into various places where the larger pool is, and this sort of thing. And so, this sort of evidence shows massive migrations that occurred, and it could be looked at as to when that happened, because there were various times in history, of course, where massive migrations occurred, you see? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The flood created massive migrations.
Flooding really has... yes, because of weather and these sorts of things, because it's not...
No, it wasn't. The Ice Age created massive migration.
An asteroid that and a comet which puts water up on top of the land can have it so top heavy that it becomes the South Pole, because so many miles of ice, which is a weight on it, and it didn't have ice on it until that time. So could you imagine that the last massive comet that hit was the Burkle crater, which is in the southern Indian Ocean.
The Big Bang?
Also it was in the Pacific, because the Pacific, all these places had precipitation, massive precipitation, fallout, and so it's sort of really around the same time you could see that it wasn't just one piece sort of thing. So some bits of it went into the Pacific, of course. You could see the chevron from when a wave stopped, it sort of dumped its sand and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so as far as a Big Bang is concerned, that's a pretty big bang, but it's not
it's our bang.
Well, no, because
it's our bang.
because the Big Bang in our mind is really like let's see, nothing existing after that. Shiva was the biggest asteroid or comet that hit, like in India, and that is huge. Something like that is so massive that it's absolutely transformational.
Okay, I'm going to ask you right here, right now, the first humans, us, right? The first of us, when did they start walking the earth?
Well, when you look 70,000 years ago, look, we could just go back, but well and truly you could say long before this, but calamity and all sorts of things gets covered over, and what do we know about how far back we go? And that you could see that we're a species which you could find three different sorts of species somewhat within us. And is that just something which might that have always been a case where anything is itself, you see? You could only say that we started to be shaped probably because of oceans and seas more, but we've got a subcutaneous layer of fat which the other primates don't really have. We have a nose, and we sort of had a semi-aquatic existence relative, considering the other
Australia, earliest human earliest proof of humans walking around in Australia. How far back does that go?
Well, I'm not sure how far back but
give me an estimate.
You could see that fires that were buried over have been found, and they would have to go back at least 100,000 years, certain. But let's see. Lots of things like DNA and these sorts of things are so fragile that it's not going to really make it per se. But going back 70,000 years, which you can sort of use certain dating technique like carbon-14 to be able to look a little at this sort of thing, you see. That could be correlated with various things today, which it is. And so it has been accurate fairly when you put things together like sediments and rainfall, precipitation. But then when we become to have occupation, we could see various things. But asteroid and comet impact are things which truly have impacted us. The last time it caused a huge migration was 2807 BC when the Burkle crater was hit. But then if you go back, you could see all sorts of migrations that happened to the Americas here. So, for instance, you could see a range of things that happened in China. And so you have, for instance, a massive migration of people that come from China because it's under siege. And in that same time frame, you've got Polynesians and other people sort of coming. And so calamity and various conditions occurred for people to migrate, and even in more recent time, you see. And so, so DNA studies sort of show even more recent time actually
everybody's
populated.
Been everywhere.
The originals here do show blood that comes from people that came more recently from China, as well as blood type that sort of goes back too. So it's sort of really all of a sudden you've got a massive migration. But where people get annihilated, they're not going to leave much DNA and of their behind per se that could be found.
Are there, sorry to interrupt, are there ancient structures in Australia, and how come we never hear about it?
We could certainly say that they have a culture which goes back at least 65,000 years per se, for sure, and that you've got evidence well and truly of sites and things that's like this. But all through time, you've got various things that happen to Australia, especially asteroid impact and things like this, and it becomes a relatively more drier continent, except of course you've got beautiful areas of richness that existed and always did, relative, but calamity, it also, as the seas separate, but 70,000 years ago you can see like DNA evidence of the Aboriginals' blood being sort of connected DNA-wise to people in South America and,
really? Wow.
and places like this, like in Africa, which and Madagascar, and you see, you could put all these pieces together, and absolutely the flora and fauna could be seen as a continuous condition. The same with the mountain ranges, you see. So when you put the Earth back together, like the continents, all of a sudden you can see how all the mountain ranges were, and you can go back and look and see, especially what we've got north-south, where ridges are east-west now. They used to be more north-south, and this is in a much, much older time frame, you see, where the Earth was more east and west was north and south, you see, yes? Well, we have tipped over. So the Earth's sort of been tipped over a bit and things like that. But the biggest thing is that escarpment that's left for us to look at is only sort of small places, really, that takes us back and this sort of thing, yes? And then the challenge where it's been a paradigm, a frozen paradigm of which is the dating of rocks, which is really completely not reliable whatsoever. You see, that's really quite definite, that looking at age by looking at rocks and things, and the dating techniques that have been used for this is definite that that's not scientific at all.
Now, also, speaking of rock, you've seen ancient structures that the rocks look like they just fit perfectly together, right? And how were they able to put those, where you can't even fit a piece of paper through it? How were they able to do that, these ancient
in more recent times, of course, which you would imagine that where somebody did look at this first to see that these have bubble right through it, and it would be synthetically made. And so where something is like that, you can make a face so perfect, just like this, in fact. And it's a face, but behind the face, how far back does the, the formed rock go? It's sometimes, of course, it would go back to be something, but it would be the face of it more that they wanted to make sure they fitted those faces together good. And
well, how did they do it? I mean, was the rock melted, liquefied, or was it, like turned into like a jello? Well, I mean, how were they able to do that? And we can't do it.
Yes, well, you can mix rock that will ceramify.
Okay.
So we just don't know that because we are using cement, which the cement has to have a patent where the certain amount of material which would cause that fusion doesn't exist. And the reason is because it's made to be hydraulic and shipped around and then pumped into form, where this, like what we're talking about, was something that was made on the site more and used, and it's more quick set. But that you use quick set things, it's sort of, it's different work. But those are rocks which are synthetic, yes.
Wow. Fascinating. I've never really heard that before.
Well, we never could have considered something to be existed like that because it's ceramified. You see? Yes?
Right.
And so we only consider this to be a rock because, well, it's ceramified, but we don't have a knowledge of how concrete was used in ocean water and things, and it would set. And so that that's something which I've looked at around at all the ancient sites and things, just to be understanding a little more of how old some of these buildings are, and then the technique of the stone itself, and the likeness of various stonemasonry that goes back into two golden ages. So we've got buildings here in America, see, that go back a long way. And
Wow.
so most everybody has had a bit of a cover up.
How long would you say? Give me an example. 1,000 years? 2,000?
7,000 BC, we've got the Younger Dryas era having cleared away relative, and you've got in Canada, of course, you've got, and then all through America. It's just that the ethnocentricity was never left to be considered that there was a Western province, but the Moor certainly have this in their flag. They've got the blue on one side, which was always their Western Republic, and they have the yellow on the other side of their flag, which was always the Chinese and the desert sort of thing, the
What year
Gobi
were the Moors out here?
Desert.
What
And they had green in the middle of their flag, which represented more where they were from, which was like a Garden of Eden, which was, Northern Africa. Oh, ask the question again?
The Moors were out here. What?
The Kushmore Empire go back, and they have what's called a language today, like the Tajina language, which Tajin, preparing of food, was preparing food in ceramic. They were the ones who brought bread everywhere, and also music, made the harp and the notes and things, and taught people music.
The Taji?
And this was the tongue, but they called themselves the Massa. It's really mother tongue in their own language,
Okay.
and they just would say mother tongue, you see, in their language. But they called themselves the Massa, which they would most like the Library of Alexander, and there was just been a great force on us like that, just burns. It doesn't want the world to have known anything about these people whatsoever. So all that would be left was, these were boat people. But DNA today and blood type and these things show that there was quite a lands in the Atlantic, and also to Lemuria, as the continents all broke apart, moved apart because they were the seafloors grew from tectonic plate activity and volcanism, and perpetually growing more magma and pushing the plates further apart. And so you'd imagine 70,000 years ago, which it makes sense. You've got Australia and South America and Africa relatively connected all together.
Where is it located for people out there?
Lemuria is like Sunderland, which bits of Australia all are now up near Tibet and in Myanmar, and bits of it around Indonesia there, but bits of it went over to like Madagascar and
That's
things
a
as
big
it all
piece of land.
has spread apart.
That is
you see?
huge.
Yes, and then India was down there too. And then when the Burkle crater hit, it shot north like crazy. Because the seas grew, you see, the oceans grew, and so it pushed that continent so fast. Matter of fact, so it grew, the oceans grew, you see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when they heard of Lemuria, they didn't realize how big it is and vast. That's huge. What about, you said the Atlantic, you're obviously talking about Atlantis. So you'd say they were around together at the same time?
Yeah, there were islands in the islands that come to be in the Pacific were not islands, they were actually lands. But there have been times when all the water got dumped up into the atmosphere and dumped onto the land and left the oceans dry. And so, you see trails across the ocean, matter of fact, which those trails were to go from one continent to another. sort of thing.
Trails
and
of
then places where water was, because it was very dry time, there was not any water that really ran in the rivers or anything much.
Okay, and that was out in the Pacific. In the Atlantis. They were all coexistent together, right? Would you say?
Well, slow but sure, as the water rises in different times, like it had finally risen in 8,498 BC, it started to really rise, like radical, when the older ice underneath the new ice melted, and it retreated from the Atlantic and melted all, and that was a great flood, and everyone can remember when that happened. It actually flooded all the Cinque Cypre trees and everything in Mississippi down at the bottom of the river there. And so it all correlates with this time frame. But the seas rise some 20 feet, and in that circumstance, all over the earth, you've got islands and things like this, which their civilization was always close to the seawater level.
But you have structures that are far deeper than that.
Yeah.
Way deeper. Explain that to me.
Well, since water has slowly risen the sea some, of course, Boston, when it was first sort of like comes along, now it's like, I think, 100 feet or something down, I mean, in the water, out, and then way out there you can see where the original sort of structures were, but it's all underwater now.
Around past Boston and the ocean.
Well, this is in a recent time, of course, because it's like, when Boston, like, we can think, when that started to happen, whether
do we know about these structures down there? Have they been in the internet somewhere? Or?
Well, if somebody, it's just like curious, of course, you've got all these, like Avalon was found off the southern part of England.
Avalon, what's that?
It's like King Arthur and the Round Table time frame. Yes. So this is an actual time frame which truly did exist. It's just that nobody could find it because, well, that was on the coast there and it's actually flooded over, but it's in the southern coastline of England there.
That's fascinating. We need to get some rovers down there, get some video, and that would make a good show on Discovery. Avalon, all these places that would find it.
Well,
why aren't they doing this? Why do I have to think
a massive civilization that is in various areas. You could see that, for instance, with DNA, you can see that Polynesia and that area of Sunderland must have been very, very popular at some point. And you could see that when that was above land, of course, it would have been a great vegetation, massive forest and greenery and this sort of thing, and relative warm where other parts of the earth was a bit chilly, you see, in times like this. So it's been just a spot where it's had much more fusion, and you can see DNA, and their DNA goes everywhere. But Australia has had a continuous sort of condition, and DNA study starts to show this today more versus this out of Africa sort of idea. It doesn't mean that people didn't migrate where they did migrate into Africa. For instance, you've got Polynesian blood, and how could it be there except it migrated in there?
Where did humanity start?
Well, it looks like you could say some people certain it is that they've got a genotype which shows that they must have come relatively from where they were, and we have to go back, and it's not said that like there's just one spot that everybody arose from. That doesn't make sense at all.
Well, there was one human being.
When you were 70,000 years ago, there wasn't just one human being. This is just ridiculous.
Was there one at one point? Just one?
No, that doesn't make sense
somewhere.
either. Okay, so first of all, you can't find one bacteria anywhere.
Okay.
You can't find one life colloid anywhere.
Okay. Yeah? What about one DNA?
No, you could always only ever find things in a mix of other things, and this is called a fusion. So our mindset has often been set by a great uniformity, meaning that nothing was about a great ununiformity, but that's a fact of the matter. A great ununiformity more has existed, not a uniform past per se, you see? So, but also to like feet that were of a four-legged animal relative that didn't really stand upright so proper, really has feet which are for climbing trees. And so it's sort of, how do you get to feet which don't climb trees? It's sort of really not right, because you've got feet that don't climb trees, and you've only got then feet that do. But we're very different as a species from
they got there through
primates
genetic engineering.
That climb trees.
Genetic engineering has been around since we've been around. What do you think about that?
I reckon that it's so fanciful for people to think, because they're so, egotistical,
Maybe.
because they'll stop and not consider Occam's razor, which would just be the big confounding variable that would cause the idea that just something was done something. But nobody would say that every single thing that you do is epigenetic, and the things that occur, which you do and I, habit-wise, in fact, it impacts our DNA of our mitochondria, which is only ever passed on by the mother, and the father's mitochondria and her mother's mitochondria, she has those inside herself, whereas, the male only gets passed on what came from the mother.
So the mother has everything going for her, and then the man, the dad, comes in and screws everything up. Is that correct?
Well, misandrism is blaming one, and it's a typical thing that someone, until they start to study a little bit more gender egalitarianism, they have massive amounts of things in their language and ways of having thought, of course, which is just a missed opportunity to be able to learn to respond more effectively without bias per se. But you can see roles are certainly not souls, as you point out, right? So we come from more an egalitarian world where the genders are equal, you see, yes? And you can see in the golden ages this was the case, and there was no defensive walls, there was no war, there was nothing like this. There was no reason.
How many years back was that?
Well, we go in and out of a golden age twice.
Yeah, we're about to go into one now, right now.
The next, each 26,000 years, you go through a figure eight. And so we come in and we go back out again, and we come back in again, we turn, and we're sort of doing like an ellipse or a figure eight sort of thing over 26,000 years. And so there's a couple times during that period where you're coming through the center point and going back out again. And so we're so close in those moments more to the center of where we're going into the zone of avoidance.
The zone of avoidance.
Well, all of our galaxies, which our galaxy, if you put it together with about another 400 galaxies, it makes a really small dot, in our universe. It's just small. I mean, wow.
So our universe is that
400
vast,
galaxies together, though. Yeah, so we are in a stellar universe because our universe drops off with all the galaxies in it, and you can look and see that it's stellar and universe beyond universe.
Let me ask you this: you said the universe one time. You said it. Is this really, truly? Is this really, truly 250,000 light years across? That's it.
Yeah, light is very slow slug, right? Really slow, yeah. Sort of, you can see it sort of like pouring. So for instance, just to give you an example, like light can go around the Earth 7 times in a second. And so you can
And you
just
say that's
basically see it. It's so slow, you see.
Yeah,
So it takes 8 minutes, for instance. We're so close to the sun, we're behind it. And so that's interesting. You see a lot of models presented to you and you're sort of going around the sun, and that's not so, you see.
It's going around us.
No, it's actually three-dimensional. It's falling, and we're behind it, and we're doing a corkscrew behind it motion. You see, through space, because we're falling as we're orbiting behind basically the sun.
Is the sun falling?
Yeah, the sun's falling at 42,000 miles, per hour.
Damn.
Toward the zone of avoidance.
Oh, okay. So there is a limit to our universe and how far we can fall.
No, but what you could see is a crease where we are rolling over, and that space is huge columns of itself, which turn in on itself, sort of thing, and come out in some places. Yes. So, you've got places where a space is rolling in, and you've got spaces where these big, huge columns are rolling out. And so it can appear as if we just go beyond the horizon, more or less. But because a crease there and light is sort of is like a line in the sky. Yes, called the Laniakea. But so that's south of us. It's sort of we're falling south, sort of thing. Yes, and so you've got quite a density of south positive magneton charge, and you've got that ridges and things travelling through the Earth to the north, which you've got a lot of north negative at the north, and that's two different types of spin, really. Yeah.
Fascinating. So, we've established that we've been around a long time. The Earth and the universe has been around a long time. We started showing up, walking around in Australia about 100,000 years ago.
Well, we cannot say per se that suddenly like 100,000 years ago, but it doesn't make sense per se.
Our version of us.
Well, we can just be looking back to see what we can find and what we can extrapolate from things around, but that we've to look at things more with new eyes.
Are the people caught up on what we found out there, archaeological-wise?
Well,
regular Joes like me, and well, you're not a regular Joe.
Well, that's what I was just about to say. Yeah, that's a good point, because in a museum, things are cultured as to what stories existed, and the great uniformity would be that you don't want other things coming in, and you want to say, we have
the plot.
A direct lineage, for instance, from a Brahman, which is meaning a cow man.
A Brahman?
Well, people who put bras on cows, brazier means, for milking, and so a Brahman is a word for a cowboy.
What about bra on your head? Is that okay?
The idea of domesticating cattle and what happened where that was. But we live in a time frame where people mostly are vegetarian, they're plant-based.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we are plant-based, absolute, and our somatotype is a frugivore, so not a herbivore, meaning you're going to be rolling along munching grass, for instance, or something. No, that's not our digestive tract whatsoever, you see. But our digestive tract fits into exactly a frugivore's, and so most have never studied botany a day in their life, right?
I haven't.
And so the definition of a fruit is the body that comes from a flower. That's the definition. And so a seed isn't it? And all the various things like a nut is. And so many things is the body of a flower. So cauliflower,
which I love.
broccoli,
Love it.
Brussels sprout.
Love it.
And these are things which come from the body of a flower. So we basically are frugivore, and it does show, because before the DNA study was done, certain it was that you looked into coprolitic study to be able to see what people ate over the last 10,000 years, more or less, here. So now you can see that people people were plant-based, basically. You can see during the Indian Wars, everybody loses their way, and you can see certain calamity that caused people not to have a tradition per se left anymore.
When were the Indian Wars? What years? Like general,
You could say that they began pretty much, I'd say, around 1100 AD, because it was just back then that a republic formed here to safeguard things, and cannibalism was underway outside the republic. So you had a republic, the Creek. And Atatahara is a very old word, Massa word, which means chief. Really, it means leader, actually, in the tongue. See, so yes,
what word means chief?
Atatahara.
Atatahara.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that means chief.
It means leader.
Okay, Atatahara. That's a T-shirt right there.
Well, Taza and Kaza and all these sort of derivations all come from this time frame.
All right.
And so, you say you've got a lot of things that go on which cause people to migrate. And so how could you have a great continuity where people in boats are coming over here and coming from here ongoing non-stop from the various big ports like Chicago and San Francisco, for instance, New York, with the main ports.
That's right.
And very old. And can you imagine a time frame when the Atlantic Ocean really doesn't exist like it does today, and the Appalachian Mountains is connected to the Atlas Mountains, the Atlas Mountains is connected to the Swiss Alps, and it goes on to connect with mountain range in Russia, you see.
Yeah.
So, and you can see that it wrapped around the Earth at one point when it was a bit smaller, because these ridges only go north-south, and if you shrink the continents back, you can see boundaries of the continents which come into proximity with each other, and right there you can see flora and fauna and things that's like this, and even the signature of the rocks and everything, and certain also DNA, you see. Yes. And mitochondrial DNA from the mother that we inherit, which has got the X and the Y, and then dad's chromosome, Y chromosome.
I was reading that not too long ago, in the deep parts of the ocean out there by Hawaii somewhere, they found a brick road. How insane is that?
Well, no, it's
deep.
not. You could see this all over the seafloor, off the coast, everywhere, matter of fact. Before that all gets covered over a bit, with GPS, it was big for me to have a look and see when that first came out. And it was interesting because it was really, I saw where Atlantis was in the southern Azores plain there, and how that's all got covered over and silted. And
why can't we just share the LiDAR with everybody? That way they can just see it. Who cares?
Because a great conformity has existed. That's what we're saying, which is a redaction of information, and criminals are only the ones that would redact information. But you could understand that you could see people do not want to be able to give their DNA, because you know why? Because it's all being interpreted in a way that can be totally for those people who have a selective bias, and so a lot of trustedness isn't existed under the circumstance of that. And so because transparency doesn't exist like it should,
that's a future episode.
You see, we only, all of us, could make decisions because we've got proper transparency. And when you've got a monopolization, which we have today, you don't have transparency, you see.
Monopoly is no good.
Well, everything that the founding people that put things together, like you can see in the Articles of Confederation, you can see a lot of common law, and you can see the Magna Carta, and you can see things which is to be, that's created. And so the Iroquois nation did have this. You see, that's actually the ideas they gave and things for a republic.
All right, for the Iroquois.
And
it
would be republicing their debt, you see, so they didn't have a debt anymore.
Wow.
The people didn't have a debt.
Could we do that here?
Yes,
Would
that's
that be
actually
beneficial
what we.
to our country?
Yes, well, that's what we do because that's like what you select when you could look and see what would be work best. There's only some things which really can work best, in fact, and republicing a debt means that you don't have negative inducted currency whatsoever,
All right.
which we shouldn't have, as we the people actually really is the real estate.
That's
and
right.
that's 2 inches above
We're the
the
real
earth where you are, you
real
see,
estate.
and that's your BC bond today sort of thing, you see. Yes, and that's the real estate. These are things which is being traded, and that shouldn't be right, of course, because each person really is part of the bank itself, you see. And so all the currency that's created massively, the small portion of it that could present your life is nothing in relation to the amount that's being created and what you do create anyway. So it's your what's called an unlimited worth, whereas gold is of limited worth, you see. Yeah.
But check this out. We are deaf and dead-ended ants. And that's what we get paid.
Under a label that is put, somebody wouldn't necessarily say and give themselves that label. You might have a claim yourself, or
I got plenty of claims.
well, you might not, but otherwise it's just that somebody has a claim, simple, and there's a claimant, and somebody's prosecuting claim, and a claim exists, and as simple it is. But it only could be where you can join the living with the living, and fascism is where you put a corporation and you join the corporation with the living. And so after that, can you talk to a corporation, I want to ask you?
No.
Can a corporation hear you?
No.
You see, so that's the problem with that, you see? It's fixed and stuck, and that's a problem. It's really need to be overcome, because woman is a noun, and it's of our species, and that cannot be defined, because a woman, our species defined everything else, you see, and gave everything the word and what have you. And this is the chain of command where things are. So you're more the source. And so if the great uniformity was that you were not the source, people were separated, they didn't know each other, and would that be just like a false identity? And who would that help except somebody who wanted to take advantage of it all?
Did the Great Council originate in Atlantis?
Only that you could say that first, luminism is not something which is natural per se at all.
Okay.
But if you're conditioned to do things, it's like something is nurtured to come to be, but it wouldn't be ordinarily proper. So, for instance, like if you were deaf and blind and you never saw the expression of emotion, let's say, right?
Yeah.
What emotion do you think you could do perfect?
Smile.
That's right. Yeah, we all can smile naturally, but like if I said, you're deaf and dumb, right, blind, and you've never seen anything, and now show me anger, or show me aversion, adversive types of emotion.
I think frustration would be the next one after smile.
It's an interesting thing that the vast majority of these people can't express those things very well. And you can show, as a matter of fact, that aversive learning is all involving muscles which contract our body and pull it in, and the habits of pulling your body in a pattern of things. And it's the muscles that pull you in are all connected more to the aversive componentry of the brain, matter of fact, and the muscles which hold you up against the Earth's gravitational field are more preferentially linked to pleasure and interest and openness naturally, right? So it's just instinctive, of course, that if you've got something that's attractive, you move toward it, and in fact it is that when you prick like an amoeba, you move away from it. So forward and toward actually really is a direction that more where we use the interest and pleasure, and away from is something which is you're moving away from. Yes. But where you're associated in life, it's more what you're moving toward and what's coming within you.
And it's normal to move towards pleasure than to move towards pain.
Well, if somebody uses the vestibular sense in the correct way, you wouldn't be turning the volume up on something that would be not so quite right for you within your inner dialogue. You'd be turning it down. And you're using direction and the tonus on things in the correct way. And so, for instance, if you're born with a family where your children are, or people are basically good, you're growing up and you haven't rented any space for fear, and so for the people, the children were grown and they're people basically good. There is no fear like water that's coming into their vessel to sink it at all, and they don't have to have habits that kind of continuously bail something out either. But you could imagine if like I say, it's good to be hygienic, let's say, and somebody says, I don't want to be unhygienic, to say the same thing. There's two negatives to make a positive. Mm-hmm. That's not in everyone's language. This sort of comes about because of counting. Mm-hmm. And so it comes to be accepted that after a moment of time, if I said don't, that means to an adult that something else isn't to happen. And so that slow but sure, we start to be considered that that means something else. So, for instance, I could say to a child, stay on this side of the road and play it safe, or someone else could say, don't run across the road right now. And so most are in an embedded command and are unaware of it. But it's an interesting thing that you and I, we only really have three ways we can process information ourselves. And two of those ways cause us to be able to have greater success where we are, because they're sort of causes us to have congruency relative, whereas another way doesn't at all. And so, for instance,
what are those three ways?
Well, when we're in pleasure, and interest, you always are focused on a congruency and a parallel processiveness.
Got it.
And an integration is agreement with the parts. So to the degree to which that is, you could have agree with the parts with the condition that something existed. So there's two types of math in a response, and there's one more, a third, and that's it. It's math, and that is a don't, won't, can't, should, try, but, must, only, or a polarization. So put this aside for a second, because there's three ways we just talked about, and these are the three primary ways that we process information, you see. And one way could have become predominant. So if I left things to the last moment at school because it was boring or whatever, or my home life wasn't good, okay. So I left everything that I had to study to the last moment, and stress was existed whilst I had studied this, yes. So in the exam then, anxiety becomes state specific with memory retrieval. And over a moment of time, this becomes conditioned. And so this is the public fool system. About what this does is just like 4-beat or 4 timing. It's just squaring us out, and it's not letting you necessarily to be like you could be, or I, more in our frontal cortex.
If we dig deep enough, will we find older, ancient civilizations?
Well, it's interesting because we've got a Grand Canyon in Australia, which is so large, only it's down and it's more in a east-west direction, buried, and now we've got a north-south over the top of it, but down below there is a massive, massive structure which all just gets covered over, and you've got a huge 4-mile deep going down or something Grand Canyon, in Australia, you see, that's been buried over. We've had such an incredible calamities that have occurred, which just about wiped everything off the face of Australia, you see, in various times where asteroid impacts have hit.
All right, folks, there you go. That is a great look at ancient civilizations. And we've got more to talk about ancient civilizations. It's going to be a reoccurring theme, so just keep coming back. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm Empty Turtle. Dr. Jubb, could you please leave us with something wonderful to think about?
I think that probably the most amazing thing is for our own perfect detachment where someone is, and this is the most godlike beatitude, which, it's like the mountains standing unmoved, breathless in the wind more. They're big sandcastles just at the beach like lords, just washed away by the ocean. which would be virally washing things away, yet the mountain stands unmoved, breathless more in the wind. And so, of course, below this, of course, you've got an ownership and you're owned. And so in love, you're owned, and in humbleness, you're owned. And these are all beatitudes. But the highest beatitude you could imagine is perfect detachment.
All right.
So, yeah.
Take us out.